Okay, hello chess players. I had a request by one of my viewers to go over how to play against the hyper accelerated dragon. So that's what this video is going to be on. So basically the hyper accelerated dragon happens after e4, c5, knight f3, and then we're going to have g6. This is the hyper accelerated dragon, as opposed to the accelerated dragon where the knight has already gone to c6. The hyper accelerated is, they're going to play g6 and bishop g7. Basically just fianchetto the bishop even faster, which I guess makes it hyper accelerated. Anyways, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So the short answer to how to play against the hyper accelerated dragon is you don't actually have to have separate preparation. I don't personally even have a lot of separate preparation when it comes to the hyper accelerated dragon. You can play differently against the hyper accelerated dragon than you do against the accelerated dragon. Uh, but it's not necessary, and it's also not necessarily even recommended. But basically, I mean, you should play d4. You should play an open Sicilian, and then c captures d4, and then you should just play knight captures d4. Now, if you want to, you can play this independent line. You can play queen d4, and when I was younger, I was always told that this was the way to take advantage of the hyper-accelerated dragon, that you were going to be hitting this rook on the h8 square. This was going to force them to play knight f6, and that you could take advantage of everything by advancing your pawn and gaining space, which, of course, wouldn't have been possible if there was a knight on c6 attacking the queen. This narrative seems somewhat false because, like, the positions after knight c6, queen a4, knight d5, queen e4 aren't all that special for white. I mean, really, black is doing just fine here. I've got a couple games on my database where actually black went on to win. I've got Mirosevic versus Peterson, played back in Reykjavik. Back in 1999, and Mirosevic was higher rated, and he was playing white. He was higher rated by like 200 points, and he still ended up losing the game. But it wasn't because of the opening, but still, white doesn't have much of an advantage here, if any. Black's position is certainly okay. So that leads me to think that really kind of whatever you play against the accelerated dragon, you should probably just play that against the hyper accelerated dragon. So you should just play like knight d4, and if they continue with bishop g7, depending on what you do here, like if you play c4, and you play your Maroczy bind, you should continue with your Maroczy binder. If you're like me and you like to play the knight lines with knight c3, you should just continue with knight c3. Now, keeping that in mind, you do kind of have to keep track of, okay, what happens if they don't transpose into my accelerated dragon lines? Like, what happens if they try to play something independent? And it is certainly possible that, black can choose to try to play some sort of hyper accelerated independent line, and I haven't really run across a whole lot of them in the knight c3 lines because there just really aren't that many options. But one line that people try that is at least independent from the rest of my preparation is knight c6, which I guess you could have reached from the accelerated dragon move order as well. Bishop e3, and then some idea involving queen b6 without the move knight f6, trying to take advantage of the fact that the bishop is still, on this diagonal or whatever. Now, the thing to keep in mind is if they try to do something with the bishop on this diagonal and you have this knight c3 move in, and they have failed to play the move knight f6, knight d5 is always possible here. You can play knight d5. You can get away with this because there is no knight on f6 preventing you from playing knight d5, and you're attacking the queen, and the queen doesn't really have queen b2 as a resource because knight c7 is on the way. So for example, if queen takes b2, you would have rook b1, queen a2, knight c6, bc6, knight c7 check, king f8, knight takes a8, and white should have some sort of really huge advantage here. Just because, we have this knight getting out, we're of course up a whole rook, and this little amount of inconvenience that he can do to your king, which you should just let him, you should play king f3, is going to be absolutely fine because there's no way that after, say, bishop f1, rook f1, he's going to be able to take advantage of your king before he can just hide. You're going to be able to play g3, king g2, king h1 if you want to. He's not attacking with enough pieces to make your king in any danger. He can't get to it, basically. So white should just be completely winning. This position should just be decisive advantage white. So queen b2 is no good. The other option is to play something like queen a5 check, and I guess this is reasonable. And there's a number of moves here that are probably just major advantage white. You could probably just do something simple like c3. b4 is probably reasonable. I think bishop d2 is kind of cool. You can play bishop d2, and then you can reposition the bishop to the diagonal that the other bishop is on, basically sort of forcing this exchange of bishops. The idea would be something like e6. You can play knight b5, and you're taking advantage of the fact that bishop on g7 is temporarily hanging, which means that e captures d5 is not possible because of bishop g7. So that means that black is going to have to play something like king f8 to hold that bishop. So for example, king f8, we could just simply retreat our knight. We could play knight c3, and now everything is fine. Not just fine, but like white should have some sort of major advantage here. For example, black can give up the dark squared bishop of his own volition. He can play bishop takes c3, knight c3, a6, and because of all these holes on the dark squares, this should just be major advantage white. So if he doesn't give up the dark squared bishop of his own volition, if he plays knight f6, I mean, just knight d6, just plant your knight on this really beautiful post, and this position should also be major advantage white. So, in conclusion, when you're facing something like the hyperaccelerated dragon, which is really just a slightly different move order to try to get to the dragon, and in a sense, the accelerated dragon is also a slightly different move order to get to a dragon, but the hyperaccelerated dragon and the dragon share the common theme of not wanting to push this d pawn and trying to get the d pawn, the two-step option instead of the one-step option to save that whole tempo for black. The hyperaccelerated dragon is making this slightly different argument, which is, okay, I haven't committed to knight c6 yet. I haven't committed to knight f6 yet. Maybe I'm going to get a chance to use my bishop on the g7 square to put pressure on d4. And unfortunately, without playing knight c6 and knight f6, you can't really do it, because if the knight hops from c3 to d5, you're going to be pressuring, c7 and b6. So the hyper-accelerated dragon really isn't all that different from the accelerated dragon. And you can use whatever preparation you have against the accelerated dragon against the hyper-accelerated dragon. And if they try to play some independent hyper-accelerated dragon line, at least what the theory says right now is they're just not any good. So you should have some sort of advantage there. They need to just basically transpose back into the accelerated dragon. As for playing something independent against the hyper-accelerated dragon and try to take advantage of it, trying to play something like queen d4, you can do it if you want to, but the positions are no better than very, very slight edge white, but I would hazard to say maybe even black is just okay. Black is probably just equal. You're better off just sticking to whatever you play against the accelerated dragon. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.